So today I want to share the birth story of my son, Cohen Hans. He was born September 12th, 2021, so he is just about to be 8 months old. And he is my first baby, and I had a home birth, and it was an incredibly positive experience. So I want to share a bit about that because I loved watching and listening to home births or birth stories while I was pregnant. So my entire pregnancy, I was completely convinced that I would go at least a week overdue. Statistically, first-time moms go to 41 weeks and 1 day. That's what the stat is. So I actually wouldn't even tell people my real due date because I was like, nope, I'm gonna go 7, 8, 10 days overdue at least. And I was just totally convinced of that. So my due date was September 12th. Spoiler alert, he was born on his due date. So the day prior to my due date, I was so done physically, emotionally. I was super uncomfortable. And I was so discouraged because I was like, I have at least another week of this. I was just so convinced that I had another week to go. So September 11th was a Saturday, and it wasn't a really nice day. I remember it being a windy day, but I was like, we need to get out of the house, get distracted. So my husband and I went for a big walk. We actually voted in our federal election that day. We went out for lunch. We went to this carnival thing at our church. We did so many things just to stay busy and stay distracted that day. So that evening I had a huge meltdown, and I was just like, I can't do this. I can't do this for 10 more days. I'm so uncomfortable. I'm so done. And I was just bawling. I'm texting my doula and I'm telling her this, and I'm like, I'm so discouraged. I'm going to be pregnant forever. And she's being so nice. And she's like, every single woman thinks that they're going to be pregnant forever. And surprise, nobody is pregnant forever. So she told me later that apparently while we were having that conversation, while I'm having this big emotional meltdown, that she actually told her husband, I need to go pack my bags. She's going to have her baby today or tomorrow. So apparently it's very common for women to go into labor after having this emotional release. So I go to bed that night, everything is fine. We actually stayed up late, and I had been tired, so I was going to bed early every night. But that night I was like, I need to print out my birth plan. I had written up a birth plan in case we transferred to the hospital. I had specific things that were really important to me, but I hadn't been able to print it because our printer had been finicky. So we stayed up till 12:30 that night, which is normal for me right now, but at that time that was really late. So I go to bed, everything is totally fine, and at some point in the night I start having mild contractions. And I think at the beginning I was sleeping through them, and then they were getting more and more intense, and I was so uncomfortable laying down. So I'm kind of tossing and turning, trying to breathe through these contractions, and they weren't that intense. It was just that I was so uncomfortable laying down. So I finally just get up and I putter around the house. I think I put the clean dishes away, and at that point I decide that I have to hang up twinkle lights in my living room, which was something I wanted for the birth, but I thought that I still had another week to go. I think at that point my contractions were still every 10 to 12 minutes, and I could totally still breathe through them, but I would have to stop what I was doing. So I'm trying to just keep myself distracted, because the first time you experience contractions, they're not like anything you've experienced. So I'm starting to feel kind of anxious and overwhelmed. My husband's asleep, and I decide to turn on the Christian hypnobirthing podcast. So hypnobirthing was actually not something that I planned on utilizing, not for any specific reason. It just wasn't a tool that I was planning on using. But in that moment, I wanted to turn that on. So I think I was actually sitting right here, and I just had them on and I had my eyes closed. So I'm listening to the Christian hypnobirthing affirmations, and I honestly don't even remember what they were. I think that they're just things your body was made to do this. I trust that God will keep me safe. Just things like that. I honestly don't even remember which ones they were. And I also had made birth affirmations, and they were in a few different places around my house. So affirmations were actually pretty significant to me during labor. But I just sat here listening to those for quite a while, and that really helped ground me. And after that, my whole labor, I feel I was super grounded, super calm, and it just that I don't know, it was maybe 30 minutes, just really helped to set the mood for me. So around 5 a.m. I go and I wake my husband up, and I just tell him just FYI, I've been having contractions for a few hours. I think I got out of bed around 3:30, so it's now 5 a.m. And he jumps out of bed thinking that I'm in active labor, which I wasn't. This is very much still early labor. And he kind of starts hustling around the house. He blows up the birth pool, which definitely didn't need to be done at that point. But I think both of us are just doers, and we just wanted things to be done. So then at one point, I remember we were both in the living room and I walk towards him and I just start sobbing and I say, we're going to meet our baby today. And we didn't know if we were having a boy or a girl. So it was very much just like baby. And that was really exciting throughout labor as well. So around 6 a.m. I call my doula. I think she actually didn't answer her phone the first time, but then she called me back and I just told her, FYI, I've been having contractions for a few hours. They are getting closer together. I can still breathe through them. I can still talk through them, but just wanted to update you. And she told me to go back to bed. She insisted that I try to sleep and get a few more hours of sleep. So we both went back to bed for a couple more hours. But around 7:30, I texted my midwife just saying I'm having contractions. At that point sometimes they were 2 minutes apart, sometimes they were 7 minutes apart. So they weren't super consistent. I mean, they were consistent, but they weren't, and they were lasting about 45 to 60 seconds. And at this point, I think I was still kind of expecting everything to just stop because I was not expecting a due date baby. So we decide that we want our doula to come over. So she comes over around 11 a.m. And we figured that she would just have some different ideas for coping with contractions, different positions. So we wanted her to come at that point, even though I was still feeling very calm and very in control. So at this point, I think right around the time that she came, our friend also came to pick our dog up, and we knew that we just didn't want him here during the actual labor because there was going to be people in and out. So he took the dog for a few days, which was great. So over the next several hours, things just kind of stayed the same. Like, I was having contractions consistently. I was just in lots of different positions. I was super uncomfortable sitting or laying down, which was pretty normal at that point in my pregnancy anyway. So I wanted to be standing or bouncing on my yoga ball or on my knees, like leaning onto my ball or leaning onto the couch. That was definitely the most comfortable position for me. And it was dead quiet in our house. So I had like a labor Spotify playlist that I thought I might play. We never had music playing. I thought maybe I'd want like worship music on. Never. It was so quiet. I would kind of like breathe through contractions, but even that, I think that a lot of times nobody else knew that I was having a contraction because I was really quiet. It was so quiet. And I actually remember a few times thinking like, this must be so awkward for everyone else because it was just hours and hours of total silence. So we actually had our doula and then like a backup doula as well. So at this point, I think we're around 4 p.m. So I've been having contractions for about 12 hours and not super intense. But at this point, I'm starting to feel tired. Like, I didn't get a good sleep the night before. I'm definitely not feeling like I can't handle it, but I am feeling like, okay, I'm getting tired. So my doula recommends doing the Miles circuit. So if you're not familiar with that, it's just a series of poses, and the goal is to just help with baby's positioning. So we also did spinning babies. They're pretty similar poses. So she has me like kneel on my hands and knees with my head down, and as soon as I get into this position, I throw up. So we didn't do that position again, but then she suggested that I get into the birth pool. So they filled the birth pool up with warm water. Sometimes it's not good to get into the birth pool too early because it can slow things down, but at this point I really needed a break. I needed a nap. So she had me go in the birth pool. She told my husband to go take a nap, and I slept in the pool, I think on and off for like over an hour. I would have a contraction and then I would sleep between contractions. And I remember hearing that from other birth stories that I listened to while I was pregnant and just thinking like, it seems so weird that people could fall asleep like in between contractions, but I totally did. So I would lay back like this with my back against the pool, and we had like a real birth pool, so it was pretty tall, so I could lay back and I would sleep, and then as soon as I had a contraction, I would get up and I would kneel on the other side of the pool with my arms over the edge, and I would just like keep going back and forth between those two positions. And I think my contractions really did slow down at this point. I think they slowed down to like every 10 to 15 minutes again, but I think it was really good that I got that rest. So my doula kind of wakes me up and she says, Tori, I think you need to get out of the pool. We need to things need to keep moving. So as soon as I stand up and step out of the pool, I have a really strong, intense contraction, and I like dropped to my hands and knees right on the floor, and I threw up again at this point. So in hindsight, this was definitely transition. I don't know if we like recognized that at the time, but it's funny because I'm on my hands and knees having contractions, and then the contractions got intense right away. And I remember I wasn't wearing any underwear. I was wearing like a bralette. and I'm on my hands and knees with no underwear. And I just remember thinking, like, through these intense contractions, like, I don't feel safe. So I needed to like cover my bum with a towel, which is so interesting to me that I even cared about that in that moment. But I just remember feeling like that didn't feel safe. Even though I totally trusted everyone there. So like I said, I think that was transition. I never had a cervical exam my entire pregnancy or my whole birth. I don't know like when I was 7 centimeters dilated or whatever, but my midwife still wasn't at our house at this point. And I had kind of handed over like that communication to my doula. So my doula's texting the midwife, they're texting back and forth, and the midwife just keeps saying like, okay, keep me updated. And I hesitate to share about this part with my midwife because whenever I've told people this, they always get really mad at the midwife and say that whatever. That's not my intention, but my intention with sharing some of the stuff that I'm going to share about the midwife is just that, so at this point I'm going through like a major mind battle. So because my midwife isn't here yet and she's not on her way, she just keeps asking my doula to time contractions, which we both thought it was weird that she was still timing contractions. Like contractions were super regular. There was no issue with contractions slowing. Like I think I'm having contractions like every 3 minutes. They're lasting a minute, perfectly on track with where I should be. And it's been like that for a long time. So I think I remember my doula kind of being like, she still wants me to be timing contractions. But anyway, I'm going through this mental battle. I'm still on my hands and knees. I'm having really intense contractions. I think some of them were even like 2 minutes apart, which is like a minute of contraction, a minute break, a minute contraction, a minute break. And that's super exhausting. And I was very informed about birth. I knew about transition. I knew all the signs and symptoms of transition. I knew that when you start doubting yourself, when you throw up, when you start feeling like you can't do it, those are all very much signs that you're in transition and that baby's gonna be there soon. But because my midwife wasn't there yet and because she wasn't on her way, I was like, this is all in my head. I don't say any of this out loud. And I'm just thinking, I'm nowhere near, like this isn't transition. If this was transition, the midwife would be on her way. They don't think that I'm progressing. Maybe things are stuck. This, like, I don't know what anyone's waiting for. I keep thinking, what are they waiting for? What are they waiting for? And I'm getting really frustrated at this point. In my entire labor, I never once thought like, I can't do this. I can't handle this. This is too much. I never thought that. I never felt like I need to go to the hospital and get pain meds. Never thought that. I did think like, okay, I'm tired. And at this point, I remember thinking like, if I'm only 4 or 5 centimeters, like if I still have 10 or 12 hours to go, I don't know how I'm going to do this because it's going to get so much worse. Like if this is just early labor, like I don't know what I'm in for. Turns out that was the worst. That was transition. So it never got worse than that. So I also knew that sometimes you can have like internal fears that actually physically stop labor. So it's funny how like aware I was during this whole period, but I actually thought that like I need to verbalize my fears because I don't want them to stall my labor. So I actually look up at my doula and I say, I'm really scared about things getting more intense. And her response was, I don't think it'll get more intense, just more consistent, which was true. So my doula recommends going back into the shower. I think I had been in the shower previously. I loved water my whole birth. Loved the pool, loved the shower. I didn't love the bathtub. At one point I was in my bathtub and I think I was just like so big. My belly was just so big and so awkward that I couldn't get comfortable, but I loved the shower. So also my entire labor, the day before and the day of labor, I just had to poop so much, which is so common. I just kept feeling the urge to poop and my body was just, but I hated sitting on the toilet. Like every time I sat on the toilet, I would have the most awful contractions, so painful. So I hated being on the toilet, but then I like had to poop, so it was a struggle. So I'm in the shower and I feel like I need to poop. And I just say to my husband, like, I'm just gonna poop in the shower, which I did not do. But I actually think that was the beginning of the urge to push, which I did not recognize until later. So at this point, I'm really frustrated. I'm just frustrated with my birth team. I'm going through transition, but think that I'm not going through transition. I think like, oh my gosh, I'm only 4 centimeters dilated. I keep thinking, what are we waiting for? What are we waiting for? Like, this feels like things are progressing. It feels like we're getting close. What are we waiting for? Why is the midwife not here? This is truly not to throw my midwife under the bus. I think what happened was I was so calm and quiet that I think that they just didn't realize like what was going on in my head. And I think that maybe they just didn't think I was as close as I was because I was coping really well. But I'm really frustrated with my doula at this point, and we talked about this after. And I wasn't actually frustrated with my doula. I was frustrated with my midwife, and I was taking it out on my doula. And I also remember everyone is like whispering to each other. They would like go in the hallway and like whisper, and I was like, "You're talking about me." And I feel like everyone talks about this like labor land where you're like completely unaware of everything. I was like hyper aware of everything that was going on, even though I was in labor land. Okay. So after laboring in the shower for a bit, I say to Quindon, my husband, this isn't the urge to poop, this is the urge to push. So he goes out, tells the doula like she feels like she needs to push, and I think she was surprised about that. So she comes into the bathroom and she says, I want you to try to breathe through that. So if you've ever experienced that intense urge to push, which not every woman experiences during labor, especially like with a medicated birth, often that can be kind of like suppressed. But she comes in and she says, blow out as if you're like blowing out the candles of a birthday cake. So like through a contraction. So I start doing that. It's really painful, but I'm able to kind of like breathe through this urge to push. My body is like fully bearing down, trying to push this baby out, and I'm like trying to breathe through it. So I did that for like 20 to 30 minutes, and it started getting so much more intense. It's like trying to resist the urge to vomit. Like your body just wants to do something, and you're not in control of it, so trying to resist that urge is like unbearable. And I'm kind of annoyed that she like told me to resist this, because I feel like I'm working against my body. Like my body is trying to birth this baby and I'm trying to keep the baby in. But I trusted her and that there was a reason why she wanted me to do this. And I actually think that it was beneficial when I get to my actual pushing birth phase. I think that this really helped bring baby down into a good position to push. So after being in the shower for probably an hour, I say, I need to get out of the shower. It's freezing cold. And Quindon puts his hand in the water and he's like, this water is boiling hot. So for whatever reason, maybe it's just because the water had been on me for so long, but it felt so cold to me. So this stage of trying to resist pushing, it was definitely the most painful part. It was actually worse than actually pushing. Oh yeah, so she also, once the like blowing out a birthday cake strategy wasn't working anymore, she told me to do like horse lips, like but like more aggressive through my contractions, which didn't really help a whole lot. You're pulling my hair. So then the doula comes in and she says, the birth pool is ready with fresh hot water. Do you want to go in the pool? And I was like, yes. So I get out of the shower. I'm like, my contractions are like back to back to back. And I'm like, I do not want to have a contraction not in the water. So I just like walk straight from the shower across my house to the pool. I'm sure I made a huge mess. And I get into the pool. I remember overhearing the like backup doula on the phone with someone giving them our address. And I remember thinking like, is she calling the paramedics? Do they think that the midwife is going to miss the birth? Which they weren't. They were actually calling like, there's a main midwife and then there's always a backup midwife who comes like near the end or after baby is born. So she's on the phone with the backup midwife. So I make it to the pool and I make the decision in my own head. I remember thinking, this is like harsher than I would ever speak to someone, but I remember thinking in my head, like, screw everyone. This is my body. I'm gonna push this baby out if I want to. Like, nobody can tell me to hold the baby in. And when I talked about this with my doula, we kind of debriefed afterwards. She couldn't really say anything. She's not the medical professional. It would be like against her liability to say like, okay, like you're ready to push now. So she at this point is basically not saying anything. She's supporting me. She's great, but she's not really saying anything. And I think she like secretly was hoping that I would decide that on my own. I remember wanting to like use my voice in a productive way because I knew that like different tones, some can be productive and some can be panicky. So like I said, I was on my hands and knees like all day long or kneeling over things. So that's how I was comfortable in the birth pool. But at this point, it's like 6-7 p.m. So it's been like a long time. And my legs are getting tired. So I'm on my knees leaning over the pool, but I keep having like leg spasms, and then my legs would like float up, which felt good because it like took all the gravity and pain and discomfort off of my legs. But when you're pushing, it's really important for your bum to stay under the water because baby can't come out. So once I started pushing, I remembered my mental state just like completely flipped. I felt encouraged, I felt energized, and I just remember thinking like, I'm gonna meet my baby like any minute. I'm gonna meet my baby so soon. And instead of working against my body like I felt like I was doing for the past hour, I'm now working with my body to birth this baby. So I am 100% welcoming the pain that comes with pushing. So I pushed just a handful of times, and then like I mentioned, I never had a cervical exam. My midwife is still not here at this point. And I just decided to reach down and see if I can feel anything. Baby was like just a couple inches up. And we knew that baby was head down, but I didn't feel like hair. And we for sure thought that we would have a baby with hair. Yeah. So I remember thinking, my water still hadn't broken, and I remember thinking like maybe baby's still in its sac. A baby born in their sac is call on call, and it's very, very uncommon. So I totally welcomed the pain at this point. I was not scared of the ring of fire. Like it just felt so good to be working with my body, and I was like, the faster I get this baby out, the faster this is all over. So I gave it everything. You're noisy. So with every push, I just gave it everything I had. And I could feel the head inching down and then going back up, and then inching down and going back up. And I was sitting right by our front window. The curtains were obviously closed, but I remember I kept like peeking out to see if the midwife's car was there yet. And I knew that she was minutes away at this point. But she didn't know that I was pushing and that baby was right there. So as soon as she pulls into the driveway, the second doula runs outside and she says, "The baby is crowning." She's pushing, "The baby is crowning." And that sends my midwife into this like frenzy. And I was like, shh. I'm like so frustrated that she's so loud. And I wanted to say, "I don't care if you don't have a mask." So anyway, she throws her bags all over the house, and I keep saying, shh, like I keep shushing her. And I think that the doula and my husband at some point are basically like, she needs you to be quiet. So eventually she like gets all her stuff together and it's peaceful again. And I'm sitting like this again with my legs out in front of me. So I push his head out and I can see it, and it's in its sac. And as soon as the head was born, I felt so much relief. All of the pain was like gone. And then my body just took a break for like 4 or 5 minutes. And I actually confirmed later that it felt like an eternity. So I'm just sitting there with this baby's head out. And I actually say, I can't believe I'm about to have a due date baby and it might be born on call. So my husband is behind me, like supporting me. I tell him to go around to the other side so he can catch baby. So my next contraction came and his body came right out into his dad's hands, and now I'm getting emotional. I didn't think I'd get emotional. But my husband catches the baby, puts him right up on my chest right away. He came out crying like super loud, which is honestly such a relief. I know it's okay if babies aren't crying, but it's just like such a relief when they come out screaming and you're like, okay, everything is fine. And everyone just kind of like sat back and I held my baby and nobody like touched me or bothered me, which was so important to me that I was just kind of like left alone. Like we obviously knew the baby was okay. He had a really high APGAR score, like 8 or 9. So we still don't know the gender at this point. So I say to my husband, "Are you ready?" And then I hold him up and we both totally thought he was a girl. And we both say in unison, "It's a boy." And then we laugh. So we just kind of sat in the bath then for several minutes. And again, like nobody touched me. Nobody did anything. They like put warm towels on the baby and like made sure that he was warm, but other than that no one was like interfering. And then I delivered my placenta like still in the birth tub, so we waited for the cord to stop pulsing, and then my husband cut the cord. And then at this point the water in the bathtub was kind of getting cold, and obviously you don't want baby to get cold, so I hand the baby to to his dad, and I went and took like a 30-second shower. My midwife helped me, and then we all just went into our bedroom and laid on the bed and snuggled, and she did a quick exam. At this point I had no tearing, and then other than that they still waited to do any of the newborn exams. They don't need to be done the second the baby is born. So at that point, like, I think she quickly looked over baby, she quickly looked over me, and then they just left us alone for a little bit, and they came back into like the birth space and they cleaned everything up, and we were just like by ourselves in my bedroom, which was honestly one of the coolest parts about a home birth. Is just, and obviously you're taken care of, like they're not negligent, but they aren't rushing around to do everything so that they can move on, you know, to the next baby in the next room. At this point, I think I look at my husband, and we had names picked out, but we hadn't said the name. Like right when he was born, we didn't say like, oh, Cohen. So we're by ourselves, and I was like, so his name is Cohen, right? So he was born at 7:34 p.m. Contractions basically started at like 3:30 in the morning, but that was very much early labor. So I would say I had, I don't know, maybe 8 or 9 hours of like active labor. So it's 7:30 at night, and I wanted breakfast in bed. So they made us bacon and eggs and sourdough bread. I just remember they set off our smoke detector. So our bedroom is right off of like the living room, which is right beside the kitchen. It's all really close. I think the door was closed, but we could just hear, it was like, they were like a bunch of busy bees out here. And I remember it being like so hysterical that they were like rushing around, and we were just in this like golden hour bliss. So I breastfed him right away. I remember at first being like, I need 5 more hands to like do this, and my midwife helped me get him latched, and they brought us food, and then they did his like newborn exams. So busy. You're a busy bee. They weighed him, and he weighed 9 pounds 10 ounces, and at first they read how much he weighs, and every single person was like, no way, there's no way that that baby is that big. So they like reset the scale, weigh him again, 9 pounds 10 ounces. I did not tear. So yeah, they cleaned the house up, they left it spotless. You could not tell that there was a birth in that house. It was just such an incredible experience. It was such hard work. It was the hardest work I've ever done. Parts of it were painful, parts of it were really hard. I will not say that it was super easy, but it was such a positive experience. And I just remember, I just felt so empowered and strong, and I felt like through my whole labor, every single second of my labor, everyone trusted me and everyone trusted my body, and no one ever made me feel like my body can't do this, or we need to intervene, or, which there's a time and a place for medical intervention, don't get me wrong. I just felt so trusted, and that was so important to me. So such a positive birth experience. Lord willing, I will have all of my babies in my own home. Just can't recommend it enough. And also having a doula here was just incredible. She was like an angel. But anyway, that's my birth story. Thank you so much for listening. And if you're new here, make sure to hit the subscribe button. I would love to have you here. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you again soon.